Hey, sports fans, it's still me. I shaved. I look about 10 years younger than I did yesterday, and I am fresh, shaven, Mr. Clean for my YouTube watchers. And don't worry, it's still me. Same voice, same personality, same delivery, same good old stuff coming from the Minnesota Tim podcast. So I haven't lost my edge. And as the game approaches, this is the big game. The Minnesota Vikings face off against Kirk Cousins for the first time following his departure, following his decision to bypass a 2-year contract for the Minnesota Vikings and sign a guaranteed contract on the Atlanta Falcons, which includes a no-trade clause, which includes like $100 million guaranteed, and it also includes one of the worst divisions in football. They're 6-6, 3-game losing streak, and atop the NFC East or NFC South, one of those NFC South, I suppose. And Kirk Cousins made some comments as he prepares to face off against the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to dive into those shortly. But Judd Zulgad of Score North has shared an interesting report on their radio show. And this is courtesy of the Purple Persuasion, who listens to all of these shows somehow, posts some interesting things. So if you're not following the Purple Persuasion Twitter account, I'm not paid by the Purple Persuasion. I'm a free endorser because he does an incredible job. But the report says this: the Minnesota Vikings are not going to do an official tribute video for Kirk Cousins at the game on Sunday, per Judd Zulgad of Score North. Judd defined his intel on this as pretty solid, and that's all he can say. And of course, you're going to get mixed emotions, mixed reactions from this report, because Kirk Cousins is one of the tougher guys to discuss because he's so good and nice and solid. I love Kirk Cousins as a man, Christian man, a man of faith, a family guy, very likable player, very likable guy. But when Kirk Cousins signed with the Atlanta Falcons, my love for the player, went away. I'm not as pro Kirk Cousins this season as I was last year. I'm not rooting for Kirk Cousins to have success on the Atlanta Falcons. However, I do like the guy. I like the guy. I love that he's a man of character, a man of faith. But he's playing for the Atlanta Falcons now. I'm not cheering for Josh Allen. I'm not cheering for Patrick Mahomes. I'm not cheering for Kirk Cousins. Maybe if he makes the Super Bowl, I'll cheer for Kirk Cousins over some other guy. But I'm not going to lie. To see Kirk Cousins go 0 for 4 last week against the Chargers, 0 touchdowns, 4 picks, I had a little smirk on my face. And I love that the Minnesota Vikings are not planning to do an official tribute video. Now, they'll probably do something. They'll probably do a thank you Kirk Cousins announcement. But an official tribute video takes like 2-3 minutes, posts his highlights, posts his comments, blah, 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 yada, 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 the whole thing. And tribute videos are so overdone these days. A guy leaves, plays on the team for a few years, comes back, there's a tribute video. It's like, really? Come on. I think there should be official tribute video rules. And here's rule number 1. Rule number 1 is that you should have to be a part of that organization for 10 years. That's rule number 1. You spent time there. You dedicated yourself to that organization. Playoff win here, playoff win there. That's not enough. You need to dedicate yourself to that organization. You didn't ask to be traded. You stuck in it through thick and thin. Rule number 2. And this is the exception to rule number 1. The asterisk to rule number 1 if that player provides a championship at any point of their time in your city, aka a Jack Morris, then they deserve a tribute video. Okay? If he's a part of the organization for 2 years, leaves, but provides a championship in that window, then that player deserves a tribute video. So the rules are simple. Very simple. That player needs to be a part of the organization for 10 years to receive a tribute video. And the one asterisk and exception to that rule is if they provided a championship on that team. Okay? So that's my rules. Those are my rules. And I guess I'll make one more exception. Karl Anthony Towns. I just looked him up. And I thought he would fit into that 10-year window. He fit into a 9-year window. He's 9 years, so I guess he doesn't fit into that 10-year window mold. But there's a little difference with Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns went through GM after GM after GM, head coach after head coach after head coach, player after player after player, and stuck through with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So there's some exceptions to the rule. But Karl Anthony Towns, I think, deserves an official tribute video when he returns to Target Center because of the stability that he provided the franchise and the dedication that he had to a Minnesota sports team that you don't really see very often anywhere in sports. So rule number 1, be on the roster for 10 years. Rule number 2, which is an asterisk to rule number 1, provide a championship. And then rule number 3, if you're a guy like Karl Anthony Towns that went through GM and head coach and over and over and over and over again, you didn't ask to be traded, you stayed put, and then you're forced out by some other general manager or president of basketball operations. He didn't ask to be traded. That wasn't Towns' decision to leave. Well, then you can have an official tribute video. So the rules are extending as the podcast goes on, but I love that the Minnesota Vikings are not doing a silly tribute video for Kirk Cousins. He played on the team for 6 years. He provided a playoff win over the Saints, but lost to the Giants in the play. He didn't really provide exactly what we were hoping Kirk Cousins would provide. Kirk Cousins failed to live up to the expectations of being Super Bowl contenders when he signed his first big 3-year, $84 million contract on the Minnesota Vikings. Isn't that crazy to think about? 6 years ago, 3 years, $84 million is what he signed for. And his contract for the Atlanta Falcons was like $100 million guaranteed. The amount of money for quarterbacks these days compared to just 6 years ago. Kirk Cousins, when he was, how old was he? Kirk Cousins, when he was 30 years old in the prime of his career, signed a 3-year, $84 million contract. At 36 years old with the Atlanta Falcons, he signs a contract for $100 million guaranteed and up to $250 million if he fulfills all incentives and plays out the entire length of his contract. Contract money for quarterbacks is absurd. But here's Kirk Cousins on what it's going to be like for him to return to U.S. Bank Stadium.
I don't know. I think you just kind of go through the week, go through your process. You understand, it's like a familiar place, but at the same time, this happened when I played in Washington for the first time back. I had no idea where the away locker room was. I had never been in there. So in that sense, I'd been to the Washington Stadium many, many, many times, but had never been to it in that way. Kind of felt like a rookie in that sense. So that'll have that same feeling, I assume, on Sunday, where it's, okay, I've been here many times, but in this way, this is the first. So there's certainly some unique experiences there, but at the end of the day, you're there to go play a football game and go play your best and win, and that's where your focus is ultimately.
So that's Kirk Cousins on what it's going to be like for him to return to the bank. And again, he played on the Vikings organization for 6 years. It wasn't a long 10 to 15 year run. So it makes things a little different. Someone else posted an interesting tweet on X, and came from Dustin Baker. And you see his name right around. He's a writer from Vikings territory. And he says, it would be wild if we booed Kirk Cousins. Guy was the personification of kindness for 6 seasons in Minnesota. He ain't Sean Payton. Now, Kirk Cousins is going to get booed. He took the money and left, which is something we all probably would have done if we're being completely 100% honest. He took the long-term contract and left. Guaranteed money. Of course, something that we all would have done. But Kirk Cousins will get booed. Now, would I participate in the booing? No, I'm not a guy that likes to participate in those kinds of things. I like to observe. I like to sit back, watch, relax. So I'm not going to boo Kirk Cousins if I attended that game. I'm not attending the game, but if I were attending that game, I wouldn't boo him. But I understand why Minnesota Vikings fans would. He didn't put in a run like Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is not going to get booed because Karl Anthony Towns did not leave under his own power. It's completely different. Karl Anthony Towns was shocked by the trade. Kirk Cousins choose to leave the Minnesota Vikings. So when you think about it from that perspective, when a guy chooses to leave your state, your team, the rules completely shift to, yeah, you are going to get booed. And it's not like Kirk Cousins, gave the Vikings 12 years, did his best to win a Super Bowl, tried and did everything in his power and then left. That's a little different. Like when Kevin Garnett was traded to the Boston Celtics and came back to Target Center, Garnett did everything under his power to try to win a title in Minnesota. And in fact, didn't even want to leave to Boston when the trade was being orchestrated. He had to waive his no-trade clause, and he didn't want to do it. He was loyal to the great state of Minnesota. He had to be convinced to leave a crappy Timberwolves team and get traded to a team with Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Rajon Rondo, and all those boys. So it's a little different. And Kirk Cousins saw a massive contract, saw a dollar sign. In his defense, we all would have done it, but he chose to left. He chose to left. Why am I struggling with that? He chose to left. What the frick is wrong with me? Huh? He chose to leave. Let's go. Yes. I knew I would get there. He chose to leave. He chose to leave. Anyways. So Kirk Cousins will get booed. I love that if Judd's report is correct, and I have no reason to doubt that it isn't correct. I love that the Minnesota Vikings are not doing an official tribute video because they shouldn't. Thanks for watching, and thank you for going on this journey with me. Hit that subscribe button right there.